Welcome to Post Break. My name is Chris Peterson. I'm board secretary of the Post New York Alliance and chair of its Education and Events Committee. Today's topic is, does AI know workflow? And today's moderator is me. I haven't moderated one for a while. This is big number 60, so I'm excited to be in today's discussion. A little bit about me is I'm finishing working on a scripted film called Finnegan's Foursome. And also before that, I've been an executive producer at several post facilities and technology companies. And before that, I was a Predator producer, shooter, editor on unscripted productions. And I've just served on an advisory board for a software company called Deliverable, which is an AI-based management software tool for creative studios, like the ones we all work at. Which brings us into today's topic. I'm going to read the description really quick. Forgive me for reading verbatim, but the committee kind of worked hard to frame this topic perfectly. So here we go. We've been hearing a lot about the effects that AI could have on the post-production industry. When considering AI by itself, it's a complex topic, it's a nuanced topic, it touches every aspect of what we do, creative, technical, financial, legal, more. So today, we're not doing that. It's too much. Instead, we're going to consider AI in the context of applied present-day examples and use cases. What are our friends and colleagues, most of us in New York, some of us in the Post Alliance, what are the present-day uses of it? There will be no prognosticating, no speculation or doom and gloom. Instead, we're going to hear about not only how we're using it today, but maybe choosing not to use it at all, or even in some cases, being told that its use is expressly forbidden. I'm not worried about 5 years from now, right now. We'll hear from a variety of crafts, press, and even MPEG Local 700, and we'll keep an eye toward the demands of editorial and VFX workflows, ideally, but not ideally looking at workflows, but not necessarily. Takeaways will include new lenses through which we can consider this topic and ideas about how we can be ready for this topic in our careers and crafts right now. Karate chopped my hand again. Quick note on the format change. Typically, we've only had 2 or 3 panelists and they talk the whole time. Today, we have 9 or 10. And they're going to be giving, again, these shorter use cases and anecdotes to give us this broad snapshot in time view on the topic. And then if that means that we leave some topics dangling or things we'd like to go into further, cool. We'll be doing that next year. So it'll be 9 or 10 brief use cases and anecdotes. And once someone speaks, throw your questions in the chat and they should be able to get to them once their part is over. Even if they haven't spoken yet, let's get that chat active. So let's dive right in. Our first panelist is Mark Loftus, editor-in-chief of Post Magazine, which is at postmagazine.com. Mark, what has your approach been to covering this topic? Do you get manufacturers and software companies contacting you to run the stuff, or what's it?
We're definitely hearing it from, I would say, 2 different angles. And one is the manufacturers and the manufacturers that are implementing AI technology into their products, which then make their way into workflows. And then we're talking to studios that are actually using the tools and telling us about the projects that they're working on. So I kind of had, I see a lot of news coming across my email, and I had fun just going through like the past few days worth of email. I literally have like a dozen different examples of how it's being done or the tools that are available to do this. So I'll just rattle off 2 or 3 quick so that I'm not taking up too much time, but there are really a lot of examples here. So one example is a studio out in Hollywood that is a facility. They provide services, they do restoration, they do post-production, and they also develop software. And their software is used for restoration, and then that's licensable to other people that are doing restoration that want to use it for that purpose. So it's companies called MTI Film. And they've developed an AI tool for their restoration purposes that can generate missing frames. So if you're doing restoration, and they're working on like Beverly Hills 90210 and The Golden Girls and shows like that. So if you go back to the original elements and you're missing frames, they can actually regenerate the frames that are missing for it, up to I think 4 or 5 frames. They said to make it look good. In order to do restoration purposes. They also do daily services, and they can use AI to identify slates and then sync up sound to the slates to get your dailies done quicker without having to maybe rely on the time code to do that. So that's a studio that's using AI in their workflow, but also making it available to others that want to use it. There are tons of tools out there. One I came across was called Amp Studio. It's a voice changing feature. So suppose you're working on a project, an animated project, and you don't have 5 different vocal talent to work with, but you need a woman's voice, a man's voice, a child's voice, a robot's voice. You can kind of essentially process your one voice to any of these different demographics that you're looking for. So you're able to get different pieces of media out of it by doing, just using a plugin. Another one is company called Pixotope Reveal, which uses machine learning to create on-air graphics that interact with the talent, but without the need for a green screen or a blue screen. So you don't have to go all the way back to that process of shooting against a blue screen or green screen. The graphic will interact with the talent and the set that you have correctly. Another interesting one I came across was Universal Music Group. They just redid the Brenda Lee holiday song "Rocking Around the Christmas Tree." They used a tool called SoundLab's AI mic drop, and they essentially took out Brenda Lee's American, English vocals, kept the music, kept the background, translated it to Spanish language, put it
Hmm.
back in using the same thing. So you say, okay, well, that's kind of cool, but what's the practicality of it? Well, if you're Universal and you own this piece of content, you now have the opportunity to license that content in a different application than maybe you could have done in the past, maybe in a Spanish language piece of content, different radio stations, things like that. So you're extending content that you already have into other opportunities. Okay, and then when you talk about the tools themselves, you look at companies like Blackmagic with their DaVinci Resolve tool, which now has speech to text and text editing capabilities. They have ability in their Fairlight tool where you can use panning to move your sound around based on tracking the visuals of your video. They have color matching tools so that you don't have to go through and do so much of the manual color matching from different shots and stuff. So there's a lot of different things there. I have a bunch more. I don't want to monopolize it, but from a tool standpoint, there's really a lot of opportunity, especially on the soundtrack side of things, but on the workflow side, from visuals, from simplifying stuff. And you look at companies that may be media companies like a Madison Square Garden network or a Yankee YES network, Yes Network and stuff. You have all this content and you don't want to go back and manually tag all of this content. So you use AI to go back and find footage of Derek Jeter and all of these things because you can't sit there and one-to-one watch this in real time and start tagging in and putting in keywords, but you can use AI to do that. And if you can kind of tag your media and make it that much more accessible, that could help you in your workflow as well. So those are just a couple of samples I have, in the past couple of days that I've come across.
That was fantastic. I can tell we need to have you back on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Really quick, you cover NAB New York wall to wall, and you generate a lot of video content there. What percentage do you think was talking about AI this year?
I feel like everybody wants to say that they have some AI component to it. And yes, and a lot of them do. I don't think a lot of it's smoke and mirrors. Like I said, some of these storage and media asset management companies that say, well, you're already using our storage. How do you optimize the use of that storage? How do you take care of these massive libraries and better get the media out of it that you may have, and that way if you want to monetize it. But again, everybody thinks of a media company as like, okay, you're Sony Pictures or Universal. There are, like I said, the New York Yankees, the Miami Heat, they have footage from their games. They have the in-game graphics and broadcast video, non-broadcast video that they use on their screens. So they have these big libraries that they have to kind of manage, and you can't just sit there watching it and start tagging and putting in keywords. So if there's a simpler way to do that, that would be good. Obviously, the tool manufacturers, I mentioned Blackmagic with their DaVinci Resolve. Adobe obviously has a lot of tools that do it. So I think it's pretty much we're seeing realistic use of it, and I would imagine at the NAB show in Las Vegas in April, we'll see more of it. But uh, I mean, I'm excited. Like I said, just going through my email from the past couple of days, I was able to pull out a dozen
Hmm.
examples of tools that are available for it. And obviously, you get into the whole ethics side of things, and that's a whole nother conversation. But there are tools out there. One interesting piece, I spoke with the folks at Stephen Arnold Music in Texas. They do sonic branding, and they did this Taylor Swift challenge where they wanted to see if they could use AI to create a Taylor Swift type of track, not by copying her music, but by analyzing her music, finding out what were I think they have like 250 different emotional attributes that they can identify, and then recognize those attributes and then use it to create similar content that has those type of attributes. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going out there, and that's a sonic branding scenario there. So like they're looking to figure out like, hey, is our music registering with the audience that we're trying to get it in front of, CNN and things like that. So I'll shut up now.
No, fantastic. That was great. Everyone, any questions for Mark, please drop them in the chat.
Mhm.
Um, next, um, we were going to go to uh, Corey Johnson.
Hello.
Corey, hello. Corey, you're an editor. Can you tell us the types of projects you edit, and has AI, have you been using AI on them?
Yeah, so my work has primarily been as an assistant editor and VFX editor, which is where I see most of the uh, AI advantages in the workflow. I use it quite a bit. And just to give an example of like, as we're talking about the current right now, I'm just signed up. I just started on a job that is using Adobe Premiere as a VFX editor, and I've worked for the last 7 years or so with Avid. So I found that AI has been really helpful, specifically with ChatGPT, to just ask it a simple question like, I've been using Avid, this version of Avid for years. I used to be able to do this. Now I'm on Premiere. How do I do the same thing? And it's really effective. It's wrong a lot, but it's really effective at sort of helping understand in a way that feels like real-time feedback versus trying to scour the web, find a YouTube video, get to the bottom of, how to navigate a type of system that I'm not familiar with. Um, and with that, I think I don't see um, the fact of the matter is that it comes from knowledge. Like you have to have the knowledge in order for the tool to work. It can't just do the job for you. You have to like know what to ask, and you have to be able to read what doesn't work for it for this for AI to serve its function. Um, so that's been huge. Another huge benefit that I found is writing code because as a VFX editor, especially on bigger projects where there's a higher scale of media management and managing assets, shot counts, plates, etc. It's been a really good tool to help with coding, specifically right now with my Adobe Premiere workflow. I'm learning that Adobe Premiere lets you use JavaScript to talk to Premiere. So I'm currently setting up, and I haven't had huge success with anything to show, but where the direction I'm headed is I'm able to type in to, again, Chat GPT is my main source, type in, this is what I want to do with JavaScript, with Adobe Premiere, what can I do? Like, write me the code for me to do this. Again, I have a background in Python. I don't know JavaScript, but I know programming languages well enough to be able to read the JavaScript code to understand when it gets things wrong, when it gets things right. And so with that, I've been able to write a code based off of ChatGPT that lets me pull when I build a timeline for a pull request, I can actually pull the metadata just by clicking a button. It like compiles all the metadata into a CSV file. And so the next stage that I'm going to implement is using ShotGrid so that it can take that pull data, push it to ShotGrid. And so this turns into like a one button thing. That's the dream. And it's very feasible. I can see already that it's a possibility. It's just trying to find the hours to put it together and implement. So that to me is huge. That is, it feels like, as somebody who's used FileMaker primarily for years for VFX tracking, it feels like this is opening up doors to bigger and better workflows for VFX editors. So that's been huge. Another use that's been very beneficial is using the AI roto tools inside of Resolve. I, on previous jobs, have been able to compete with other vendors so that I've actually been able to take VFX work that normally would have gone to like Bot. I don't know if everyone who's familiar, but Bot is a really popular VFX vendor in India that a lot of times like the boom removal and stuff gets sent to. And I basically, because of these AI tools, have said, I'll do it for half what Bot was going to do. It's something I have to do a temp for anyways. And so for me, I'm getting the benefit because I'm able to make some additional money, and it also stays in my world. So I don't have to turn over to another vendor and get the vendor's plates shots back. It's like just stays in-house. So yeah, that's been huge. And probably, I mean, making money is a great, any extra money on the side is yeah, it definitely felt like a huge advantage. Those are the big, I would say the big workflows. Another use is that I think a lot of us have gone to using generative AI, not just in work, but in personal life, is if you have to write a really heated, if you're in a heated conversation and you have, you're having to reply all to a email about something very technical that has, Netflix executives on board, and you want to be like, actually, it's been really great to type it all out, send it to AI, say, help me tone this down, and, I want to I just want to call out like how like plagiarism is a serious concern with ChatGPT. I do feel like in these contexts of like writing documentation code and sending nice emails doesn't really feel like it's crossing those boundaries, because documentation is just language that the people making the service are saying, please copy this and use this language. And then an email is, I don't know, it's not, we're not writing poetry. Yeah, so that I would say um, that's mostly been my day-to-day use case. I'm also a writer, and I stay away writing-wise from using it. I don't think it's a good tool for that, but that's
Sure.
sort of out of the scope of post-production.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for those use cases. That's great. I think people in the chat might start asking you for your code.
Yeah, right, right. And I have to share it because I didn't write it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Corey. If anyone has questions for Corey, drop them in the chat. Next, Mike Noble. Mike Noble is an editor as well.
Hi.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, yeah, so I just wanted to talk real quickly. I don't have a ton of like firsthand use with AI. I have used it for sizzles and for documentary rough cuts when we've been asked to create or basically like we're looking for either a video or an image that we don't have that we can't find online. I'll just give one example. I was working on a sizzle for a show that was based on cooking, and we were looking for a hot dog stand that had hot dog on the top of it, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I created that in uh, sorry, somebody just came into my edit suite. But yeah, so I actually created that one in DALL-E. And what I've found though is that when you do create those into when you do like use AI for rough cuts and to create images that you don't have, I think it actually in in my case it I think it actually worked against us because people see it and they kind of recognize it as AI, and I think it can you know kind of give out a wrong impression to the people who are looking at the sizzles and things like that. It can create like a poor quality kind of connection. I think it's better to use just a blank slate with image to come. But the whole reason I wanted to be on here is because I did invite an editor friend of mine to talk about a story he had where, like a lot of us in this last couple of years, he was kind of courting corporate clients, and he did find some. And one of those corporate clients, which is a very big company, they asked him to install AI editing training software on his machine. And he said no, and he didn't get the job. And I've asked him to come on and say this, but he wasn't quite comfortable doing so. And he, asked me not to name the company, so I won't. But it was a huge company, and I don't know, that seems very ethical and scary, and it's unethical, um, and really not right that someone would be asked to do that, and then if they turn it down, not get the job. So I would just say if anybody has that experience, they should probably go to New York Post, like New York Editors Collective on the Facebook group, or go to Blue Collar Post and say it. This happened to me. You don't have to necessarily name and shame, but I think we should all kind of like have each other's backs as far as things like that are concerned.
So an interesting example of AI almost being mandated.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, he can't verify that he didn't get the job because he chose to turn the software down, or chose not to install it, but seems pretty obvious. But yeah, that's all for me.
Interesting. Yeah, that reminds me of an anecdote I can share really quickly of being asked by a client to design a graphics package for a documentary series. So lower thirds, maps, explanatory graphics, just the day-to-day stuff for a price that was way too low, a fraction of what it should have been on the budget. But they said, well, just use AI. Just do it with AI. And I'm thinking, huh. And this was a year ago. So again, that kind of that idea of kind of pushing it on people when it may or may not even be the right answer. So wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Grace Klein. Thank you for coming on today, Grace.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Grace is also an editor.
And sometime assistant. Currently, I'm assisting on a scripted show. And
Great. So if you want to share from that
Yeah.
perspective, that would be.
yeah, I wear two different hats. I often edit in documentary and like docu-comedy kind of stuff. And then I assist on scripted narrative shows. And so I have a foot in two worlds and two different senses of what's okay to do. When I'm working on doc stuff, I cut a sizzle for a very low budget doc, and we had voiceover that was not right. We did not have access to the talent to re-record the voiceover. It wasn't like named talent. It was one of the producers, but she could not write and record voiceover for this thing. And so I fed her voice that was in the previous cut into 11 labs and created a voice model and rewrote the voiceover and spit out a file that I was able to use in this sizzle, and that was a fine use case. But right now I'm working on a big scripted series with SAG actors, and if we have lines that are missing, I would never do that. And I don't think anybody has to tell me not to do that. You just know not to do that. And so I can see places where it gets murky, where it's not as black and white as to whether it's okay to fake someone's voice, because you're like feeding it into the 11 labs black hole, and they have that on their servers now, and who knows what they'll do with it. So that's just like an ethical gray space that I don't think we've learned to navigate yet. And really, I use ChatGPT for all the things that Corey was talking about, apart from JavaScript, but writing emails, getting the tone right on things, like that sort of thing. Like at one point when I was looking for work, I needed to reach out to someone I hadn't talked to in ages. And I was like, oh God, I don't feel like writing this email. And I just wrote into ChatGPT, write a nice email to this person saying I would like to catch up. And it did. And I was like, this is fine. And it made the conversation happen, and it made my life easier. It was a good thing. One of the things with AI that I think is kind of funny is that, we all know Avid Script Sync, and Avid has branded this as Script Sync AI. I remember back in 2006 or 7, I was working on a documentary and I beta tested Script Sync, and it worked essentially the same as it does now. Like, we used it to sync our transcripts, and I just find it funny that Avid is calling this an AI tool. And I'm like, yeah, technically, I guess, but it feels, I don't know. It just makes me laugh every time I click that button. Trying to think of what else. I haven't really done that much else with it. I feel like I'm a kind of, very vanilla user of these tools. Like, I'm happy to poke my head in and see what's there and try them out when they seem to be effective. I think, not prognosticating, but in thinking about how it fits into the larger world. And its effect on employment going forward. I think about the low budget stuff I work on and what I get comfortable doing there. And I think about people who come up through that world and then they get more successful, and they start doing things with bigger budgets, with unions, with talent. And I'm curious how we are going to navigate people getting used to using these tools when they're just bootstrapping it, and then hitting a world where there previously had been a budget for all of these things and jobs created by doing all of these things. And now you're like, oh, well, I just do that myself. Like, I don't know an answer to it, but I think it is a question we have to have open in our minds as we start to embrace these tools.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And very interesting to me, this is second or third mention of GPT for proper email writing.
Yeah, and Claude is better.
I think that's a completely
Yeah.
valid and relevant to what we do, because when it's midnight and we're in the zone and we're trying to get done and we're tired, finessing an email is tough.
Yeah.
So, and how we come across to our colleagues and clients is of utmost importance. So that's a kind of a clutch usage there.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
I've got nothing.
Good. Thank you, Grace.
No problem.
Coming up next, we see, I like the speed round vibe we have going here. Coming up next, we have Katie McQuarrie, who is
Okay.
also, hi, Katie.
Hey, how are you? Thank you. Yeah, super interesting. Grace and everyone else who's spoken, thank you. And I'm a picture editor, mostly features, was an assistant editor for a long time and long enough to have seen sort of the film to digital world. And I was one of these people that was like, they're gonna HD, it's gonna stream like on the TV, really? So I know now when AI started coming, like, okay, we got to learn it. It's gonna happen. If people are saying it's gonna happen, it's happening already 10 years ago. My experience, same ChatGPT a couple years ago, totally fascinated with it and the ideas of it. Hadn't really been using it. And then and it was an independent film, a low budget independent film that I was kind of consulting on and looking at cuts with. And I was with the two filmmakers and I was like, wow, well, where was this shot from? And where was that? And they were like, oh, this is generated on this is AI. Oh, we got this on, Dolly. Oh, we took the computer and made a website and asked ChatGPT to just write what like cheeseoid website would be. We asked ChatGPT, we wrote our voiceover narrative because it was supposed to be set 300 years ago. What is the, rewrite this voiceover in the language as if it were written in the 18th century. And it kind of blew my mind how much their movie could change with using the AI tools. One of them was 11 Labs. And after doing this, I spoke to a few editors that I knew, and some people are like, no, ethical, like we can't use 11 Labs. And a lot of editors were like, I use it all the time. And I was working on a French film. It's not SAG-AFTRA. They don't have unions in the same ways that we have unions. They have a more socialist system in general, in France. But we started using 11 Labs. It really did. I started using for stock footage searches, just searching the stock footage, right? A lot of times with these video generative AI tools, I was working on it. It's a historical film about Charles de Gaulle, and I have an interesting anecdote about that. I would use it just to help me find some stock footage, or, they have these documentary kind of, in the way when ChatGPT came out, like the very informational based quote unquote content. Remember, the word content means without tone and specificity. So we all need to, like, as viewers, demand tone and authorship of stuff, because AI will never take that away. But very just basic content stuff, I can ask AI to make me a quick video. It'll make a documentary video about Bir Hakeim, a certain war in World War II, or a certain battle in World War II, and bring up stock images and show me where to find them. And so suddenly it's taken away all of this time that I would normally have to be searching myself, in the same way that Corey has found, it'll help you find tools and rewrite things because it does these huge searches. And we used 11 Labs a lot. It's not easy right now. It took the assistant a hell of a lot of time to do stuff and get it just right. But you start to, like, the thing that I find interesting about AI, the more you use it, the more it gets to know you. I used it a ton for translation stuff because it was a French film. And so Adobe is doing a bunch of stuff in it. And I can now ask, I have the AI assistant in Adobe Acrobat. It's incredibly helpful. And it gets to know me and the types of questions. And so it'll just even start to recognize the types of questions I'm going to ask it as I ask it to translate certain things for me, or ask me to put, because as we all know in picture editing, even in features, we do a tremendous amount of kind of rewriting work in the cutting room for voiceovers or anything like that. And then my anecdote about, sort of the legal aspect that we're all gonna, because I agree with Grace, for low budget movies, it's incredibly helpful because you don't have the money to do all this stuff. And then suddenly you have a lot of tools available. They went to show the film in London and they couldn't show it because they had done a voiceover. They had taken in the Barry Lyndon voiceover and kind of used his voice just for temp. They were going to hire an actor, but for temp versions of not having to call actors or for every little word, or they're recording on an iPhone, those AI, the sound and voice tools are amazing. You get into these real legal issues. And one other just crazy aside of my crazy life, I became a SAG-AFTRA member myself, and I got the letter from SAG saying, hey, do you want to license your voice? Yeah. I'm like Corey said, yeah, I'll send the netherworld of the internet my voice and make residuals without having to run to a recording booth with having to take the time. So I don't know. I'm positive. We can talk forever also about the ideas of the future, but I think it's just important to learn. It's there. It's going to continue to be there. And yeah, I think we all have to also just demand, it's never going to take away the uniqueness of human beings. It's just going to help us out, I think. And we have to sort of demand, yeah, unique stories, right? So, all right, that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. It's interesting to hear today's use cases around scripted productions, because conventional wisdom has been that AI is mostly used in unscripted, but that seems to be changing now. So thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
Coming up next, we have someone that looks like he just joined us, Eric Rich. Are you out there?
Yeah, hey,
Eric.
how's it going? So sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. This was we're right at your turn here. Your turn to speak. So we're doing about 5 minutes per person here on their use cases today for AI. How are you using it today? We're not thinking about like in 5 years is it going to take our jobs. And your use case was particularly interesting to me because even though it's more in marketing videos and advertising, you're using it to speed up processes significantly. So could you speak to that and what three-leaf clover does? And maybe do you see some of what you're doing possibly translating into the long form world?
Yeah, absolutely. So what my company does is I'm helping small businesses who have difficulty affording local traditional productions by incorporating artificial intelligence. So say they have all these old photos and old videos that they want to put on their social media. And so I'm taking all of that content and I'm just repurposing it and putting it on and giving it to them to use to advertise however they like. So they don't have to work with marketing teams. They don't have to work with all these different types of companies. It's just they're their own distributor.
Great. So do you see that being able to also be used in, say, a documentary film or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really we're really in the infancy stage with all this technology. So when you are using Runway, or you're using Sora, or you're using Sound AI like 11 Labs, they're gonna get better over time. And the more they improve, they're gonna they're gonna help with a lot of smaller things like dubbing or and putting in a background shot of something.
Okay. And can you speak a little bit about how when you engage a new client, your technology goes in and um, is trained on all of their existing media, is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. So what I do is I'll ask them for any assets that they have, whether it be photos, videos, and I'll use that technology to make it look brand new.
And then if if the client wants super detailed changes, um, different, different edits, different shot, how specifically can you tweak a piece to get to a client's satisfaction? In other words, is the AI going to do what the AI thinks is right, or are you able to really mold it?
So yes and no. The AI, like using the AI alone doesn't just improve a shot. There's a lot of manual labor to be put into it. So if I have to, sometimes I'll do Photoshop just to kind of edit something out, or there's a lot of different types of things on my part that I have to do to make the video look exactly the way they want it.
And I shared an anecdote just before you joined about a client asking me to do a graphics package for a documentary series, and it was for a fraction of the cost that it should have been. And they said, use AI, it'll just do it. Do your clients have that perception of AI, that because you're using AI, that the budget should be a fraction of typical budget?
So that's something I always have to stress to my clients when I'm talking to them about using AI, because it's not just you put it into a computer and it just spits back out a perfect image or a perfect voice or something. It's like, so I come from an editing background, so a lot of what I'm doing is editing, really. I'm just taking generated images and voices and just incorporating that.
So the AI generates those that raw media and you're cutting it together.
Exactly.
Great. And what's your website?
Reliefclover.ai.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Next, we have, after hearing all these editing use cases, we have Rebecca Hernandez, who is a post producer and has been told by production she works on how to approach the topic.
Hi, everyone. Thank you everyone for joining. I actually, just to kind of piggyback a little bit off with Catherine and Grace, were talking about, mine is more of a cautionary tale. So I was working on this project where my editorial team was using AI for loop group or for doing some voiceovers. And it's kind of easy. You just put in your voice, you record what you need the actor to say. You take the voice from the actor and then you just put it in temporarily. This is supposed to be temp until we get to record loop group, except that it's a very slippery slope because you just use it here and there every once in a while. And it's going to get replaced when you get to sound, except that here and there once or twice adds up and it becomes a lot. So by the time we got to turnovers for sound department and we couldn't use it for previews, we couldn't use it for any screenings. By the time we got to the sound team, they had to replace everything that had been AI, which was not once or twice. It actually was used a lot more than they had realized, because we did it once or twice and then they forgot to track it. Or it gets very chaotic, it gets very messy. And so it actually took a long time. We were prepping for a screening and it took some of the time that the sound team should have been using for their work. Instead, they were doing replacements for what editorial had done. And it was something that we hadn't encountered before, because nobody had used the AI before, but they found it so easy, and it was a very slippery slope. And it was just, the lines were pretty blurred, and it just, instead of being helpful, it ended up being hurtful to us. Also, when we had to turn over a cut to marketing, there was a lot of sound that was quiet because we had to mute everything that was AI, and it was not good. So more of a cautionary tale. I'm not using it, and I'm making sure that my teams are aware that, even though it can be easy for what you need, in the long run, it can be hurtful sometimes in certain situations. So for me, it's not something that I'm going to be relying on anytime soon.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
For all the hype out there, that's fascinating. Fantastic. Thank you, Rebecca. And then to kind of, for another broad perspective on the editing side of the industry, we have Jennifer Myers, Eastern Executive Director of MPEG Local 700. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for having me. And I was interested to hear from all the other panelists about the real uses and issues that you're facing now. Because where we fit in and where the Editors Guild, where the unions fit in, is obviously different. We negotiated in the basic agreement negotiations this year, AI language that kind of puts guardrails around it, defined and captured the work. Captured meaning we identified that when AI is used as a tool, the person operating it's still bargaining unit work, and the person operating the tool, it may be a different tool from what was used to perform the same function in the past, but it's still covered under the contract, and the person operating it as a tool is covered under the contract when using it. And there were other things that we added to the contract, but it was broad because we were negotiating not just on behalf of post-production, but the production locals wanted language also that would account for the changes that are coming to this technology, that would allow us to continue discussions with the major studios who we negotiated the language with. So we had not only defined the work, but we added language that allows or provides for the opportunity to consult if the employer tells an employee to use AI in the performance of their work, that the employee has the right to request consultation about it, and it's subject to whatever the time constraints the production might have. But we pointed out at the unions pointed out at the table, there may be cases where it's not really a silver bullet. You might not be saving money by trying to introduce this technology in order to perform some of the work. It also provides for work training, for reskilling and upskilling, to the extent that these tools are going to become more in more widespread use. The employers where people are working, just to back up a little bit, I'm talking about, maybe it's obvious to people, but this governs work on IATSE, on Local 700 projects that are covered under a union contract. So there may be we've heard about some other cases that are not covered under contract, where they don't have the same obligations, but the employers, I'm sorry about the honking, the employers are also, made a commitment in the negotiations to pay for reskilling and training. And, that has to be identified. So we need to hear from our members and from people working in the industry about what is happening and what's in use. And we're going to have ongoing meetings in order to continue to identify what needs to be done, and how the union will respond to it, what types of training, what the concerns are. And we actually heard from the studios that they had concerns about copyrightability So one of the other items in the agreement is that, the employees are supposed to identify to an employer or producer if you intend to use AI. It's subject to approval if they're not assigning it to you to use the technology, because they are concerned about, because some recent legal cases that have been in the news, whether or not they will be able to copyright it if it's so if AI was used in its production. And there's not only the IA agreements, but as people have referenced, their SAG agreements, WGA agreements that also factor into what their restrictions and obligations are. So if people are instructed to use it and they are following the employer's policy, we've provided, our agreement provides for member indemnification, meaning if somebody brings a suit because they believe that the studio has improperly used their likeness or their voice or their work, that the individual employee will get, their legal costs covered by the employer and not be held personally responsible for defending themselves against those accusations. And we're going to continue to negotiate over the term of the agreement, where the agreement provides for ongoing meetings, both industry-wide and company by company, because a lot of them don't want to share information in a meeting with their competitors. And the way that I think our members and people working in the industry also should view it is that they should keep the union informed about what they're seeing, so that we know what to bring to the meeting if there are concerns. They're supposed to provide us with advance notice if they're going to use this technology, but we also need to hear from our members and from people in the industry about how it's being used, what the concerns are, what's needed, because we have to continue to assert our rights to negotiate over it. And this is all in the basic agreement, but it covers we have other contracts. In general, since the language was negotiated, we've added it to some other similar language to some other individual agreements. But in general, if there's a union contract covering, unions have a general right to bargain over the effects of introduction of something like this. So people should notify us even if they're not sure about the contract.
Thank you, Jennifer. So many moving parts, huh? And they keep evolving and evolving. Apologies, we're going to go a couple minutes late here as we move on to VFX. Ari Rubenstein, founder of Curve Studios.
Hello.
Hey, Ari.
So let's see. I mean, I could just launch into, I'm always trying to look at new tools and what I can bring to the table. And so I'm looking at all these generative AI tools. And as of yet, there's really none. I mean, for me, it's almost absolutely none that will work for the demands of feature films and episodic shows. There's a good amount of usage for processes and utility tools that have existing tools and processes we already use. So if you're a compositor on the high-end VFX show, there's certain companies that have means of creating depth extraction from plates, and that can be used to add atmosphere, different types of effects to shots. But there's other ways you can render out these same type of things. So there's quick and efficient tools, such as, I mean, we all hear Roto, but there's some real interesting stuff going on with Roto, and it's making it certainly has the capacity of creating a lot of obsolescence in companies that are only doing these sort of entry-level procedural functions for VFX. Problem is almost none of it. I was waiting to hear, I think it was Corey talked about extraction for initial extraction of Roto for maybe slap comps and editorial. And someone asked about for final, and I think you answered it. But But in my experience in the reportage I've gotten is that almost none of that AI-based roto is useful for finals, like at all, unless they're really not undemanding types of shots, like shots in the background, shots for middle ground things where things are flying by. But anything that's really demanding, where you would normally spend a decent amount of labor and cost on roto, like hair and motion blur, foreground characters, things that you really have to extract, replace a background. As far as I know, there's absolutely zero roto tools that absolutely do final, but they may get you started. However, if you're a compositor in VFX, getting you started is almost worse, because then, you know, let's say you've paid for an Indian company. There's a lot of Indian companies that do great work, but they may give you material and they think they're done. And the compositor just goes, okay, yeah, okay, I grab it. And then they just throw it out. And half that stuff doesn't get registered by the management of a VFX studio. They don't realize, they hear the compositors pissing and moaning at the coffee, you know, stand or on Zoom, that I had to redo everything, but they don't really hear it. If they understood how much a compositor redoes stuff that they've already paid for because it was insufficient, but they didn't want to. So anyhow, I don't want to get too lost in roto. So, but on the legal, I heard something interesting on the legal end, is that I talked to several software developers, and one of them, everyone would think would create, would have put a large R&D budget into AI tools to extend their workflow. I don't want to say who exactly they are, but they're ubiquitous in the global VFX industry. And their hands are tied because their legal department says, we're not going to spend any R&D on AI because everything's a use case scenario. Every tool that's built has to be fed a lot of examples from existing. Now, all of the stuff they work on feature films, the IP is owned by the studio, whatever the production house is. So they need hundreds, thousands of examples to train a tool. So they don't have the data to work with, and they're not allowed to use their clients' tools to train the data. So even if they had it, they can't put it in. And this is maybe very high-end a company that makes software that just about everybody uses. And then what's interesting is that you see Sora, you see Runway, you see all this stuff, and it is mind-blowing. However, I have never had a client that wouldn't ask for absolutely every single thing that they want ad nauseum with great pain and suffering. And the tools that have evolved over 40, 50 years in visual effects and animation allow you to do everything you can possibly imagine and hit every note Warner Brothers, Apple, Netflix, anyone has, and then go through the multiple tiers of this whole new cottage industry of QC that comes after finishing a film. These are such minutia-based notes. No AI tool can do that. Don't believe the hype. Of course, everything may get there, but right now, not there at all. You couldn't depend on it unless you controlled every single variable of design and final aesthetic. And you could say to the stakeholders, your client, how many times are you able to say to your client, I'm going to make all the decisions. You're going to take what I give you, and that's going to be it. The tools just don't exist to hit notes. As far as that, and I'm with a group of people that are sort of senior VFX supervisors, been around for between us, you know, going back to the 80s. Like, they've seen a bit of everything. We're all throwing each other on this text thread, every new thing that we can find, and we still have not seen any generative AI tool that can hit the notes that we're asked for every single day, all day long. So I find that kind of interesting. However, I do have an animation project that I get to make all the calls on. It's a lower budget affair, but I'm going to try in the next 6 months to do this completely with AI. I'm going to see if I can create a background, create this character, create a little story out of it, and just see how I can stress test all that exists and see what it doesn't do. And I create these short films on the side specifically to figure out what tools and innovations, what they can't do, so that I can figure out, you know, what I can give to my clients and not to sell them something that's because everyone is selling now. Everyone is creating a hype. If you think about it, virtual production, it's not gone, but it came before this. And if you go 5 years back, clients were saying, well, is there any virtual production? Oh, well, we got money for it if it's virtual production. So you spin it and you go, yeah, actually, it is kind of like virtual production. So then you spin anything into virtual production. Kind of like everyone's spinning everything into AI now, whether it is AI or not AI. But that's neither here nor there. I just think I love tearing it down and then see what still has value.
That's the theme of the day. Thanks so much, Ari.
Sure.
That was fantastic. Sticking with the VFX topic, sorry, we're going a little bit over. Our last participant today is Lucien Harriot, founder of Mechanism Digital VFX.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Great to hear what Ari had to say, because I agree with a lot of that stuff. We're playing with a lot of tools. I'm probably a little more bullish on it. We work in feature films, and we also have an animation studio. And so we have to be careful about certain tools we can and cannot use in certain places. There's a lot of tools. There's two types of AI tools I look at it. There's the ones that help you to organize information, which don't actually create pixels on the screen, and those are fine. And then there's the other ones that actually create the pixels on the screen, which if we're concerned about copyrights, we have to be careful. I do find that there's visual effects can be helped when we do some background fixing kind of shots, like removing a boom. It's not necessarily the roto that helps it so much, but replacing what was behind it. A lot of times there's some tools that can kind of help sort of repatch and recreate something. When we do that, we typically work with Firefly from Adobe, because they're always, talking about how their tools are copyright safe, and we'll sort of see how that kind of shakes out. But they've paid for all of their content that they trained the libraries on, which was basically all of the stock imagery that was provided by other people. So everybody got like $5 or $100, something like that, which sounds nice that they gave everybody a little bit of money. Although now that they've given out that money, they can generate as much as they want, and I'm not sure people are going to be buying stock too much anymore. So it's kind of we'll see what happens. But the tools have been interesting. I use them for producing a lot, actually helping us to bid projects. Mostly if we want to figure out in an animated film how many characters there are, how many environments there's going to be, how much dialogue, how much screen time of something is going to be. We have to be careful about not putting information into, let's say, ChatGPT and then letting that sort of go out, especially if we're under NDA for something. ChatGPT has a temporary switch that you can switch, which says that they won't train on that data, and I believe them, but I'm not sure that's going to satisfy the NDA because the NDA says you can't use a third party, and ChatGPT technically would be. In those cases, we use something called Jan AI, which is it's a model that we can run locally. So depends on what we're doing and how protected something is. I find these tools are not helpful estimating costs on projects. There's so many variables and it's so wide. It just sort of helps us to sort of focus the information. And like Corey said with ChatGPT, it's great for asking questions and doing research, but you kind of have to already be a subject matter expert on the topic to understand, is it hallucinating or not? And so you kind of have to help guide it. So it's not people aren't coming in off the streets and able to sort of create content and use it for learning lots of stuff if you don't already understand the topic or the overall strategy. So we use it for brainstorming new ideas, concept art for films, but then we'll go back and build that in 3D after that. Motion storyboards sometimes if we want to see what something might look like in an animatic. Scratch voiceover, we use instead of the editor doing Scratch narration, we'll use AI voice for that. It's faster, it's clearer, it's easier to swap out a word. Or cleaning up audio. If there's a poor or noisy recording, it can really separate the person's voice from any of the background noise. And that can help to clarify what something sounds like if they couldn't afford a real record. AI music, I don't think is worth playing with. It's if we have a project that needs some stock music, it's just so much easier to go to stock music. we've done some design stuff. We're working on a documentary about meditation right now. So we're doing a lot of this visualizing of what meditation energy looks like. And that kind of works well, you know, this sort of mid-journey type images and stuff. In this case, the producer wanted us to use AI for that. So we were happy to do that. And it wasn't really a cost-saving reason. It was more because they were trying to find stock imagery that depicted what meditation looked like, and they weren't really happy with any of it. So they were able to get some really wild looking stuff that I guess an artist could have spent a lot of time doing that, but they, as a meditation doc, they didn't have a lot of money for that. So we also use it for marketing. So I give a talk every other week on different topics about AI, and I do that so I learn a lot. But these half-hour talks, I can actually chop into these small bite-sized pieces that automatically get uploaded to social media, LinkedIn, stuff like that. So instead of an editor going in and doing these 30-second cuts, we have the Opus Pro do that. So that could be taking work away from an editor. I don't know. It's kind of a lot of that stuff nobody wants to do. So there's lots of tools that are helping to speed stuff up. And when it does help to speed it up and it's not taking a job, we like to embrace that. So it's interesting. What an interesting time to be alive and in this industry.
Very good. Thank you, Lucian. Everyone's so tight to 5 minutes. You'd think we all work in production or post-production or something. But I appreciate it. We've gone over a little bit. I'm not going to try to summarize what everybody said because I think that's for all of us here to do for ourselves and form our own conclusions. I would just like to thank all the panelists today. Thank you for coming and again, being part of our more kind of speed round broad survey format today. I just put my email again in there today. All the attendees, thank you for coming. Email me, tell me what you thought about this topic and format. We can do it again or scrap it altogether. This is all of ours part podcast. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great holiday.